What just happened could completely change the direction of the Detroit Pistons, and almost nobody's talking about it. This isn't one of those loud, headline-grabbing moments that instantly dominates the news cycle, but it might actually be more important because of that. These are the kinds of developments that quietly reshape rebuilds behind the scenes. And if this continues the way it's trending, the Pistons' future could look very different much sooner than most fans expect.
What's going on, Pistons fans? Welcome back to the channel. If you're here for real Detroit Pistons talk, real context, and real breakdowns that actually look beyond the surface, you're in the right place. Today, we need to talk about a development that carries major implications for this franchise, not just for this season, not just for the next few months, but for the overall direction of the rebuild and how the front office may be forced to think moving forward.
This is not just another rumor floating around or a meaningless update that disappears in a few days. This is something that could influence how the Pistons evaluate their roster, how they prioritize player development, and how aggressively they operate in future moves. Make sure you stick around all the way through, because once you see how everything connects, the bigger picture becomes impossible to ignore.
The organization has invested heavily in young talent, high draft picks, and long-term development. At this stage, the focus shifts from simply losing games and collecting assets to figuring out what actually works. And that's where moments like this become critical.
Every decision from here on out needs to align with maximizing Cade Cunningham, understanding what this young core truly is, and setting the foundation for sustainable success rather than endless rebuilding. This is where things get interesting, because what we're seeing develop right now has the potential to speed that process up. When certain situations arise, they force clarity. They force the front office to answer uncomfortable questions earlier than expected. Questions like, who fits next to Cade long-term? Who complements the style of basketball this team wants to play? Who is developing into a reliable piece, and who might just be surviving on potential? Those questions are unavoidable now, and that's why this situation carries so much weight.
But the next step is separating promise from production. At some point, development has to translate into impact, and what's happening right now directly affects how the Pistons view that process. It puts pressure on the coaching staff to make decisions.
It puts pressure on the front office to evaluate progress honestly instead of optimistically, and it puts pressure on players to prove they belong in the long-term vision. This is not just about one player or one move. It's about how everything fits together. The Pistons can't afford to keep guessing forever. They need answers. And situations like this tend to accelerate those answers, whether the organization is ready for them or not. That's why this development matters far beyond the surface-level discussion. Another major implication here is roster flexibility. The Pistons are going to reach a point where they have to start making decisions about contracts, extensions, and future cap space. You can't pay everyone. You can't keep every young player. Eventually, the organization has to choose who gets prioritized and who becomes expendable. Developments like this influence those decisions heavily. They help determine which players are worth long-term investment and which ones may be better used as trade assets or short-term contributors.
If the Pistons believe this situation reveals something significant about their roster, it could change how aggressive they are in exploring deals. Not necessarily blockbuster trades, but smart, strategic moves that improve fit and direction.
Moves that help balance the roster around Cade, rather than just stacking talent without a clear plan.
This also has implications for the upcoming draft and future drafts. The Pistons are still going to be drafting high, at least for now, but drafting high doesn't guarantee success. What matters is drafting with purpose. If this situation clarifies what the Pistons need most, whether that's shooting, defense, size, playmaking, or versatility, it directly shapes their draft strategy. Instead of drafting best player available blindly, the team can start drafting with identity in mind.
And that's a huge step forward for any rebuilding franchise.
This is exactly why Pistons fans should be paying close attention right now. It's easy to tune out during a rebuild. It's easy to focus only on wins and losses or lottery odds. But rebuilds are built in moments like this. They're built in evaluation, adjustments, and sometimes uncomfortable truths. They're about timing, development, and knowing when to pivot instead of stubbornly sticking to a plan that isn't working. If this trend continues, it could quietly accelerate the Pistons' timeline, not in a way that suddenly turns them into contenders overnight, but in a way that brings clarity sooner. And clarity is powerful. It allows the front office to act decisively instead of hesitantly. It allows the coaching staff to commit to rotations and roles, and it allows players to understand exactly what is expected of them.
Another important angle here is Cade Cunningham himself. Everything the Pistons do ultimately revolves around him. Cade is the franchise centerpiece. His development, comfort, and growth dictate the ceiling of this rebuild. Any situation that impacts how the team builds around him is automatically significant. If this development leads to better spacing, better decision-making, or better lineup balance around Cade, that's a massive win.
On the flip side, if it exposes issues that limit his effectiveness, the Pistons have to address those issues quickly. This is also a test for the front office. Rebuilds are easy to talk about. They're harder to execute. This is a moment that will show whether the Pistons are willing to adapt or if they're going to stay locked into a predetermined path regardless of results. The best organizations adjust, they learn, they pivot when necessary. How Detroit responds here will tell us a lot about the philosophy guiding this rebuild.
When you zoom out and look at the bigger picture, this feels like one of those subtle turning points. Not something that dominates headlines or trends on social media for days, but something that has ripple effects across the entire organization. These are the moments that look small now, but make sense later when you connect the dots. Fans may not feel it immediately, but down the line, this could be one of those situations people point back to and say, that's when things started to change.
And that's why it's important not to dismiss this as nothing. Not to overreact, but also not to ignore it. Balance matters. Awareness matters. The Pistons are still in the middle of their rebuild, but they're closer to the evaluation phase than many fans realize. The next set of decisions will shape the next several years of basketball in Detroit. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think this development genuinely changes the Pistons' long-term strategy, or do you think it's being overblown? Do you see this as a turning point, or just another chapter in a long rebuild? Let me know your thoughts in the comments because I read every single one, and the discussion always adds another layer to these conversations. If you enjoyed this breakdown and you want more Pistons content like this on a daily basis, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss anything. This channel is all about real Pistons talk, real context, and staying locked in as this rebuild continues to evolve. I appreciate every single one of you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.